After years of Muslim rule, the Reconquista, or the Reconquest, came to an end. And that's what we're discussing today, on the anniversary, on January 2nd, as this was the day that the Reconquista ended in 1492. So I'm ShieldBro6 for the History Armada, and we're going to be discussing the Reconquista, the end of the Reconquista, and what the Reconquista was. So the Reconquista, it was a grim period of reconquest for the Spanish people, pushing out the Muslim rule. The Muslim forces of the Umayyad dynasty invaded and conquered much of the Iberian Peninsula in the 8th century, beginning a 780-year process by the Spanish and Christian forces of recapturing the territory within Spain. This period of Spanish history is likewise known as the Reconquista, the Reconquest. By the early 1490s, the tributary state of Granada on the southern Spanish coast was the only remaining Muslim presence on the peninsula. You can see here a map with the time periods as they slowly pushed the Muslim forces south, and you can see each correlating time period with each color. Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabel I of Castile, the Catholic monarchs, launched war against Granada in 1482. The Islamic territory surrendered on January 2nd, 1492, and was annexed by Castile. And that was on this day, and that's why we are discussing the end of the conquest and what the conquest was. The Reconquista ended hundreds of years of Muslim influence on Spain, and led to the expulsion and forced conversion of many Muslims remaining in the territories, as well as the Alhambra decree, which expelled Jewish peoples from all territories of the Catholic monarchs in 1492. So we saw a complete conversion and expulsion of anyone that was Muslim or Jewish. Reconquista, or Reconquest in English, in medieval Spain and Portugal was a series of campaigns by Christian states to recapture territory from the Muslim Moors, who had occupied most of the Iberian Peninsula since the early 8th century. So it did not completely start out as a religious event or religious reconquest. Rather, it was just Spanish monarchs trying to reclaim their former land that their kingdoms had held, but there was an obvious Christian and religious undertone that would only grow as the centuries went. Through the beginning of the Reconquista, it is traditionally dated to begin about 718 CE, when the Christian Asturians opposed the Moors at the Battle of Covadonga. The impulse towards reconquest was expressed only sporadically throughout the first 3 centuries of Muslim hegemony. After a failed invasion of Muslim Spain in 778 and 801 by Charlemagne, who captured Barcelona and eventually established Frankish control over the Spanish March, the region between the Pyrenees and the Ebro River, which you can see pictured here. He is the one with the crown on the right. So, as he controls and establishes himself in the Spanish marches, the Muslim Moors do still hold the rest of the Spanish continent, the Iberian Peninsula. And Asturian kings, presenting themselves as the heirs to the Visigothic monarchy that had ruled Spanish territories prior to the Muslim conquest, capitalized on dissension between the Moorish ranks and expanded their holdings in the late 9th century, because there was a lot of discomfort, a lot of dissension, a lot of upset populace with the Moors, which allowed them, as they expanded, to kind of weaken their control, because as they overextended themselves and expanded their holdings in the late 9th century, the Asturian kings were able to capitalize upon this. The Reconquest might have taken root at the earlier date had it not been for a resurgence in the power of the Cordoban Caliphate and a break between the Christian kingdoms of Castile and Leon in the 10th century. Well, in the meantime, it should be pointed out that the Christian and Islamic peoples of Spain had become tightly associated with each other culturally and economically, to the extent that consequences of the crusading spirit that manifested in the 11th century were often scarcely less harmful to the Christian conquerors than to the conquered Moors. they were so deeply entwined culturally and economically that they depended upon each other. So if you lashed out at a Muslim populace or a Muslim ruler, you would also inadvertently affect the Christian populace and the Christian rulers because of their entwinement. And of course, we do still see a heavy influence in the architecture and some of the foods in Spain with the Moorish influences there. So, at the time, Moorish unity broke down, and the Christian lands of northern Spain were briefly united under Sancho III Garces, Sancho the Great, who expanded the holdings of Navarre. Navarre is a region of northern Spain now, and it had been recognized for centuries as part of the Spanish Marches and has its own place on the royal banners. And they were able to expand the holdings of Navarre and make their holdings there known due to the breaking down of the Moorish unity. And this saw Sancho create the kingdom of Aragon in 1035. And his successors there pursued the Christian reclamation of the peninsula quite earnestly. Alfonso I of Aragon captured the former Moorish capital of Zaragoza in 1118. In 1179, we saw Alfonso II of Aragon and Alfonso VIII of Castile conclude the Pact of Cazorla, sorry if I butchered these Spanish terms, an agreement whereby the task of reconquering the Moorish kingdom of Valencia was reserved to the Aragonese crown. They said, alright, the Moorish kingdoms of Valencia, that's all you, Aragon, you got this. In exchange, Aragon relinquished all claims to the other Moorish-held territories in the peninsula. So they said, alright, Aragon, you go get Valencia. You got this. Vámonos. But we get the rest of it. We get everything else down here south. And they agreed to it. And that is how they started to divide up the Reconquista. The last king of Leon, Alfonso IX, was succeeded upon his death in 1230 by his son Ferdinand III, who was already king of Castile. So we saw Castile and Leon thus reunited, and the new sovereign at once embarked on a great series of campaigns to subdue Andalusia. So in the red there, top left, you can see the map of what was Castile y Leon. These reconquistas by Castile y Leon, those began with the capture of Cordoba in 1236 and culminated in the surrender of Sevilla in 1248. Influenced by the crusading zeal instilled into the Spanish church by orders, holy orders such as the Cistercian, the Cluniac, and others, Ferdinand at first expelled the Moorish inhabitants of the Andalusian cities in mass, but he was later forced to modify his policy because there was a collapse of the Andalusian economy that inevitably ensued. Because remember how I said that the Spanish and the Muslim populations were deeply entwined economically and culturally? Yeah, when you get rid of a bunch of people that are entwined with the rest of the people, stuff's gonna start falling down. He also assented, chiefly for financial reasons, to the establishment of a new Moorish kingdom in Granada under Castilian sovereignty. The Granadian Moors were forced to pay Castile a sizable annual tribute, but Moorish culture experienced something of a rebirth in Christian Spain. In Toledo, a Castilian city already famous throughout Europe as a crossroads of Christianity, Arab, and Jewish thought, Alphonse IX established the School of Translator, where the Arab speakers, the Hebrew speakers, and the Christian speakers would collaborate, and it was an institution that made Arabic works available to the Christian West. So we saw a great translation go on and a great cultural boom as the Arabic speakers and the Arabic works were able to expand and share their knowledge and works throughout the Christian West, which was quite culturally important. During the same period, James I, pictured on the right of Aragon, completed Aragon's part of the Reconquest. After occupying the Balearics in 1235, he captured Valencia in 1238. Unlike Ferdinand, James carefully worked to preserve the agricultural economy of the Moors, and so he established the first peninsular frontiers of Aragon. In Portugal, Afonso III captured Faro in 1249, the last Moorish stronghold in the Algarve. By the end of the 13th century, the Reconquest was, for all practical purposes, brought to an end. The last significant Muslim incursion into Christian Iberia culminated at the Battle of Rio Saldo pictured left, where Portuguese and Castilian forces administered a crushing defeat to the enemies of the Marinid Sultan Abu al-Hasan Ali, and they saw the expulsion of these forces out of Spain. The kingdoms of Aragon, Castile, and Portugal spent the next century consolidating their holdings until there was the marriage of Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabel I of Castile in 1469, which united the Spanish crown. The Catholic monarchs, as they were known, Ferdinand and Isabella, came to be known as quite the revolutionaries. They completed the conquest of Granada in 1492, the Nasrid kingdom down south that you see pictured here. So we see the kingdom of Navarra top northeast there that I was speaking of earlier with their holdings in the marches, and now we see the unification of Castile and Aragon. So we see this huge force be born quite instantly in the Iberian Peninsula. So as these two monarchs pictured here thrust themselves southwards, they saw the conquest of Granada in 1492, and many historians believe that the crusading spirit of the Reconquista was preserved in the subsequent Spanish emphasis on religious uniformity. Evidence of this was by the strong influence of the Inquisition and the expulsion of people of Moorish and Jewish descent. But we did see the Reconquista concluding on this day, January 2nd, 1492, by Ferdinand II and Isabella I. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a little bit today about what the Reconquista was and what happened with the Reconquista. It was a long period of conflict and grim experiences for Spain, but there was also a lot of cultural mixing, as we saw with the school of the translators, the Arabic works, the Arabic speakers, the Arabic architecture with the Moorish architecture in Spain that still exists today. And it was a time of mixing cultures, but also, of course, bloody warfare, as they saw the expulsion of these Muslim kingdoms and forces. So I hope you learned something about that today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for me. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or concerns, put that in the comment section down below for me. I do read all of them. If you want to support me further, check out the links in the description of the video. But that's it for me from today. I'm ShieldBro6 for the History Armada, and thank you so much for watching. I'll catch y'all next time.